I'm Dave. We're doing a little discussion today about The Snail and the Whale, which is a film that you guys finished recently. Um, I said earlier that I'm a big fan of your work. I love a lot of these books, and this was always one that was really special to me. When I read it to my kids, I could rarely get through it without, choking up quite a bit. I think it's that message, right, of like overcoming your insecurity and helping someone in need and kind of like rallying the community. And it's a really, really strong message. But can you guys talk a little bit about like how you made this film, like what led you to this project?
I think it's something we actually have in common. Like when I remember when we were working on the Gruffalo in 2008 and 2009, we were already looking at the other picture books that Julia and Axel had made. And that's how I found out about The Snail and the Whale. And I've always loved it. It's one of my favorite picture books, period.
Yeah.
And I think like it's really perfect picture. Story is great. Illustrations are beautiful. It all comes to a close. The rhyme is so intriguing, and it's like, and it has that, really touching message. And so I had actually been trying to make this film for over 10 years, I think. So I really, really loved it. But there were a lot of challenges. Some technologically, where we couldn't even imagine how we would do the water and show the scope of the world, which is such a big part of the story. But also story-wise, there was like we were really struggling with adapting it, just because the scale difference is so big. Like it could be the tiny snail and the huge whale, and they don't really talk that much to each other. And one of the big things that we do in these films, we try to stay really, really true to the original rhyme. And so we didn't want to add a lot of dialogue or chit chat. And so one of the big questions was always, how can we even achieve this? How can we establish this connection between two characters who can hardly be in the same frame together? Because once you show the whale, you can't see the snail anymore.
Yeah.
Once you show the snail, there's no whale around, and they don't talk to each other. So that was one of the story challenges that we struggled with for a long time, actually. And it took several years of like coming back to the project, thinking about it, to figuring out how to do it, really.
Cool. So when and where did you actually make it?
So we made it then. What do you think? I think we started working on it in, everything is blurred right now.
in 20, I'm pretty sure it's 2018 we started working on it, and it was out in the end of 2019 we finished. So it was only, feels like a long time ago. Even though it was only last year we completed it.
Yeah, this year has been so strange, hasn't it? It's like we're at the end of October now, and I can't believe it. It's so bizarre.
It really is. So all the animation was done at Triggerfish Animation Studios in Cape Town.
Yep.
And then Max is based in Los Angeles. I'm based in Cape Town. And then all the audio post music recording voices were done in the UK.
Wow. I mean, one of the things that I found when our studio started working from home, we've been very, like we've always done cross-site stuff. We've had, the mothership is in Sydney, and we do a lot of back and forth with Sydney. But as soon as everybody was home, it kind of changed the dynamic of how a lot of our meetings go. And I don't know how you guys felt, but in some ways, I'm looking for positives here for this, this crazy time that we're in. But it felt like for example, Anim Dailies was better like this, because everybody's working, like everyone's in the little gray box together, and you can see everybody, you can hear everybody. You're not in a room with people staring at the back of the supervisor's head, and all that kind of stuff. did you guys find any like positives, or did anything change? Well, I guess you finished it in 19, so it didn't matter, right? This was all pre-lockdown.
Yeah, we were very lucky that
Yeah.
that this was finished before all of this happened, because we did have to travel to London to do the post, and of
Right,
course
right.
there is a really nice atmosphere at the studio, which Dan can speak more to, because I've actually always been remote.
Mhm.
I think I was there in South Africa for 1 week, and that's everything else happened remotely. And I have a lot of experience in that, because even Room on the Broom
Mhm.
10 years ago, I did remotely from my bedroom in London while the studio was in Germany, which was a much closer distance. But I've always embraced it. Like, for me, it wasn't a problem. But there is something to be said for being at a studio and
Mhm.
getting to meet people in person. And I was always really, really grateful that Dan was actually on the ground and made it possible for me to be remote. I don't
Mhm.
think I could have done that and stayed away so much if Dan wouldn't have been there. And
Right.
so he was really there to keep the spirits up, and to make a connection with everyone, make sure that everyone is feeling good. And Dan and I, so we would talk a lot between each other, but then
Mhm.
he would really manage the team on the ground. And I wouldn't like. I do think that that is very, very tricky now. If you have to be remote, I can't even
Yeah. I guess obviously animation is an industry that has been able to adapt to working from home a lot better than some. Like I certainly agree with you. I miss the communal atmosphere. I miss being able to reach over and knock somebody and say, look at my play blast. What do you think? Did I miss something? And you can still do it, but it's harder. So yeah, it's bizarre. It's really, really strange. Um, but in terms of like when you talked about post, and you guys have been able to really get amazing voice talent on your films. How do you decide like who's right for your movie? How do you figure that stuff out?
It's the subject of quite a lot of debate, and often there's because we do these movies with Magic Light Pictures, and we have wonderful producers, Michael Rose and Martin Pope, who have extensive experience in this area, and also because they're English,
Mhm.
they also have real sensitivity about how different actors are perceived over there and or received, and what a casting might mean to an audience. They've got a really fantastic sensibility for that. But I have to say, I mean, for me, it's amazing being able to sort of work with them and the casting agent, and then just talk about, as long as they're British or live in London, anyone that you can imagine, and it's fair game. They'll put in a
Right.
call and see. So from that point of view, we've been lucky. We have been rejected a couple of times, but much more lucky than not. And yeah, I'm always thrilled. I'm completely thrilled with who we get. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I was super excited that you had Diana Rigg because I'm old enough that I grew up kind of with the Avengers, and her performance as Emma Peel to me is one of the definitive female archetypes in my like what formed what I think about women and females. Um, and I obviously, Game of Thrones has kind of given her a really great place back in the spotlight. But yeah, I was really happy to hear her in your film, for example. Everyone's great, but she was just a little personal thing that I was really excited about.
Oh yeah, she was really amazing, and as all the stories go, she was very confident and sure of herself, and quite formidable. If you're going to give her any kind of direction, you really had to know what you wanted. You had to communicate. But she had such presence.
Yeah.
But what an absolute privilege to have worked with her.
Yeah, and I guess one of the things that I love really about all of your projects is there's like a warmth, and there's just this real sincere, honest performance that comes across from the actors and the animation and really everything. It's just there's a tone thing I think that you guys have achieved that I find really unique. Do you find that that alters? Like, how do you tune that from project to project?
One thing that I really love about these films is that they're all based on similar source material, but then each picture book is different and requires a different tone.
Mhm.
And to me, the films are all very different, but with that core, and I think that's what you're getting at, is like in terms of, yeah, there is an overall tone that has a lot of heart and sincerity, but also some humor, and a lot of it I think comes from its British roots, and like we have to a lot of it is through Magic Light Pictures, who've always approached these films. They always wanted them to be modern classics, kind of, and timeless.
Mhm.
So that really started with the Gruffalo. That was one of the the big briefs, was like, make it timeless. We want to be able to watch this in 20 years, and it shouldn't feel dated. And but then, yeah, each book and film has its own challenges and own tone that then feels right. So for me as a filmmaker, I always, like, when I compare Snail the Whale to Zork, they're on completely different ends of the spectrum, and yet they do have a lot of things in common.
Right, right. Yeah, I can absolutely see that. I suppose, and you generally work with the same creative team, right? So trying to make sure that everybody's all on the same page, and looking for those little nuances that make each one special. I guess that must be an exciting thing to figure out.
I feel very, very grateful that we have such a small core team on these films. Like, there's not a big committee or a studio like on top of us. It's really Martin and Michael from Magic Light Pictures and the directors of each film who make all the core decisions. That doesn't mean that other people don't feed into that. Like, everyone at the studio has a voice and can bring up concerns or ideas, and there's a lot of stuff that the teams add to it. But there's not a committee that this has to go through. It feels very pure, and I do think that's also something that you feel in these films, that they are quite honest. It's what we want to see.
Yeah.
Like, it's what we enjoy. That's even when we did the Gruffalo. I didn't have kids yet. Now I have kids. But back then, even, we were always trying to make a film that we would want to see. Yeah, it's for families and children, but we want to be able to enjoy it too. And I think that's what one of the core mantras too that we try to like achieve.
Well, yeah, I think you absolutely achieve that. And one of the things too that I really admire is you're taking a small project and you figure out ways to make it fit within, like a half-hour framework or 27-minute framework or whatever it is that you want to work with. And most of the extra stuff that you find, it's all character and performance animation-based stuff, which, as an animator, like, I love that. I love that you're able to find these little things that make it, so enjoyable to watch.
It was
Well,
one
it's
of these
wonderful,
great discoveries that we had during the Gruffalo, where it was like, back then we were like, how are we even doing this? This book takes 7 minutes to read.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to add any lines. How do we get this up to 26 minutes? And then at some point we had this revelation that actually this is a blessing, because there is no big plot that we have to service. We can really focus on character. We can do all the things that we love in every movie. We can have character moments. We do have time to let something play out. And so, yeah, once we realize that, we've just embraced it since. It's like, oh yeah, this is actually what makes it different and nice and special.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. I actually use a little opening clip from Room on the Broom with some of my animation mentor students, because I show it to them and just go, like, look how clear and simple and beautiful this establishes these characters and their relationships and stuff. So yeah, it's really, really wonderful to see.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So you mentioned, and I definitely, when I saw Snail and the Whale, I was like, holy holy cow, look at that water. So I imagine that would have been pretty daunting, right?
Yes, yes. There was a kind of confluence of things because Triggerfish was quite intimidated by the water,
Hmm.
but they've been in development on a feature film, which I can't really say anything about, but it's really exciting. They've just sort of wrapped animation on it actually,
Oh,
and
awesome. Congrats.
that has a lot of water in it, like I think
Mhm.
even much more than Snail and the Whale. And so we were able to kind of say, well, we should do Snail and the Whale to be prepared for all the water we're going to do on the feature, or else I think they may have been a little bit gun shy. So we had a VFX team that we'd been working with, but we had to kind of supplement it quite heavily. So we actually built up quite a formidable VFX team just for Snail and the Whale, then to go to roll into the feature.
Hmm.
And and even though they had various experience, most of them came from advertising,
Hmm.
and so had done sort of shorter projects with the. So they were used to a lot of pressure, but very concentrated pressure, and of course our project took about a year, and so it was a big learning curve for them. But I have to say I've been really chuffed with the way that they threw themselves at all the different issues, trying to work out the workflow between Maya, Houdini, Arnold, with
Right.
quite limited resources actually. If I have to be honest, we had some resources, but not, we didn't have endless resources. And
Yeah.
we had some very young, fresh out of college guys as well who sort of learned on the job, learned Houdini on the job. And they did really fantastic work. And what we kind of sort of our guiding principle with tackling the VFX is originally we thought, well, we're inspired by stop motion. Is there a stop motion way to tackle water? And there's some beautiful
Hmm.
stop motion films that do it. But we looked at that with the VFX team and we all went, doing water is hard enough, but to do stylized water and CGI, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And it might work against us in terms of telling the story, right? Because it's a story about scale. It's a story about a tiny character and a really large character. So we
Hmm.
made the decision quite early on to go with something a bit more naturalistic. I mean, it is simplified,
Yeah.
but it really tries to get that sense of scale across. And that was always our focus. As long as whale feels really big and snail feels really small when you see them in the water or splashing around the water.
Yeah.
And I think they pulled it off. Yeah, so I'm really proud of them.
They really did, and I love the variety of how the water works because there's times where it's really peaceful and placid, and the interaction with the whale is just like it's like butter. It's so smooth and seamless. And then there's other times where it's all splashy and the storm sequence versus like that down shot at night with when it's all stars and you just see the ripples. Like it's really beautiful.
Oh, that's cool. I'm really happy to hear you say that. I say naturalistic, but I think in that storm, those waves were, the size of skyscrapers, and
Yeah,
uh, so we did take some artistic license. But yeah,
yeah.
they did an amazing job. The really tricky thing about water as well is it looks so. We all have an idea about what water's supposed to look like, and the computer obviously when you run a simulation it's sort of saying, well, this is what you're telling me, and we would go, no, that's not what we think. And I remember us having long conversations about how we don't want it to look procedural, we don't want it to look like just mathematics, right? And then we went for a bit of a scout because we know the ocean's right here in Cape Town, and when you look at it actually, the patterns that form look kind of procedural. So
Right, right.
so we had to kind of we kind of had to admit that what's up here is not actually always what the reality is.
Yeah,
And
I quite admired your choices underwater too, because like 2 years ago I was at FMX and I saw a talk on a movie that had a lot of underwater footage, and they made some choices that were bold, and it didn't ever feel like they were underwater. There was no depth, and everything was clear, and there was no color fade off and all that stuff. And I thought, like again, when I watched what you did, you decided not to do bubbles and trails, but you still really respected, I thought, the look and feel of underwater photography and and that type of thing. I thought that was really successful.
I would say, I mean, and you hinted at it before too. It's like nature is such a big part of the story.
Hmm.
So we did look at a lot of nature, like photography and footage, and try to implement like all these things, like how does the water reflect the mood of the scene? Like, is it calm? Is it stormy?
Mm-hmm.
When we're underwater, how does it feel? But making it to some extent naturalistic, but also stylized was a very conscious decision, because it is so much of the film is about the beauty of our planet and nature, and how it's actually overwhelmingly beautiful and majestic. But it's the crazy thing is, if you look at something tiny like an insect, it's awe-inspiring and it's crazy. And then you look at the big landscapes and the mountains, and you can't wrap your head around it. And I think that's such a big part of the story and the arc. The more you see, the more you are intimidated by what is out there.
Yeah, it's really, really beautiful. Let's see. Do you guys have a favorite part of the process?
Max, do you want to go first?
I can go first. Yes. It's, to me, the process is always very split in half. There is a time where we work in a very small group and really try to conceive it and come up with a lot of ideas and board it and cut the animatic and figure out what it's going to be and create this pretty much from, don't want to say nothing, but you have a book and then suddenly it's a movie, right? So there's something really exciting about that. And I love that part of the process. But then there's this other part that I've really come to enjoy, and that is working with the team and bringing everyone in, and they just make it so much better every time. You run into a lot of problems during that process, and early on when I started directing, I found that really intimidating. I was like, we're just fighting against the time and the schedule and the money, and how are we even making this work? But with like experiencing directing more, I've really come to rely on the team, and it makes this whole process so much more enjoyable and so much more rewarding, that when you're working with people and you're really relying on them, they bring so much more to the table and they make everything better. And this is this completely different part of making a film that is super enjoyable in a completely different way.
That's great. What about you, Dan?
Yeah, so I think on Snail the Whale specifically, just to follow on what Max was saying, we had because of the same feature film that we were gearing up for at Triggerfish, we had a situation where all of a sudden a lot of the heads of department who we had been working with on the other BBC shorts all went on to supervising roles on the feature. And so on Snail, we actually had a lot of very young supervisors and HODs who'd maybe even been at college maybe 3 years beforehand or 4 years beforehand. And they did such an amazing job running their different teams. I actually found that it was more of a process of letting go of control. Used to kind of, on previous projects, we would kind of, to sort of make sure that we were getting the quality and all that kind of stuff, I had at least experienced exerting a certain amount of anxiety and control, right? But these people, they were so competent, and they had so many ideas because I'd worked on these shows before that they wanted to try out. It was such a pleasure seeing them sort of just rise up and seize the opportunity. And then the work they're doing on the feature now, it looks incredible too. So I was very proud of them, and I think that was the most fun I had on Snails, just sort of seeing that. I have to say, I also really love the music recording because by that stage, it's where you, as a director, you almost have nothing else. You can't do any more damage. and seeing your pictures just come alive with emotion for in this whole new way with all these instruments and stuff. It's always, if we have the opportunity to go see the recording, we do, because it's almost like your reward at the end of the whole journey, So that's really cool. And Renee, our composer, is just amazing. And Terry and the whole team is fantastic.
That's great. Do you guys get to go to Air or Abbey Road or wherever you record the scores? And because that's such an amazing experience.
It's unbelievable. And you know, they because Air is used to be owned by, or was started by George Martin, who produced the Beatles. And I remember when we were there, well, when I was there, I think Max, you came to the to sound but missed the music. I'm really sorry about that. But I mean, Danny Elfman was hanging out in the foyer, and they were playing the Beatles. It just felt like you were really where it was all happening. A really, really cool space.
Yeah, well, it's an old cathedral too, right? So it's really got this crazy vibe, energy to it. Yeah, it's really neat.
Absolutely, yeah. It's an intimidating space. But it's also amazing to see how quickly the engineers and the musicians and everyone and the orchestrator, Terry, gets everyone on the same page. And what always blows my mind is that here we have been working on the pictures for a year, and they come in a day, and they play this music with feeling and emotion and nuance and empathy, as if they've played it their entire lives, but they literally just received the music that day. It just completely blows my mind.
I mean, I've only been to one recording at Air. I talk like I go there all the time, but it was on, it's the end of Turbo, and it was Hugh Jackman. He was our composer. And one of the things I remembered about how incredible the musicians were was like, it'd be 3 minutes to noon, and then they would go, oh, we have this piece that's 2:45, go. And they would go, and then there would basically be 10 seconds of downtime, and that was it. Like, they were so efficient and so good at what they did. It was really amazing.
They're so efficient, and there's also, I mean, I think they're very heavily unionized and watched, behind the scenes. There's a timekeeper and everything. So that's the other reason you can't really interfere as a director too much. You can't be like, hey, I think, I have a suggestion that might cost us a lot of money.
Right.
It's a really, really cool space. I think that might be. It's funny. I'm also an animator. I also try to keep my hand in and do a bit of animation. But if I'm not animating on a show, then actually the music recording might be my most favorite part of the process.
Yeah, you can tell I'm a bit of a music geek, so that's really great too. And it's just like you say, it's such a different part. Like, you've done all the heavy lifting of getting your story right and getting the animation where it needs to be and getting the lighting where you like it, and then it seems like that stitches the music and the sound effects, just brings the whole thing and just like locks it all together.
Absolutely. It's very humbling, actually, as an animator, because it's half the experience is going through your ears. It's like, you kind of terms with your own limitations. Oh, but speaking of which, we really, I mean, the team, we all you guys, a bit of a debt of gratitude, because we looked at Turbo a lot, because our character's a snail, right?
Yeah.
And we wanted to really see what you guys had done, and it was really cool. I mean, there was like amazing stuff there that kind of informed our thinking about how we wanted to approach our performances.
Oh, thanks.
So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Because as an animation person, I go back and forth. Like, when I looked at the work that you did with the snails in particular, because Turbo was really challenging, and everything you said about the whale and the snail and the scale, that rhymed. We absolutely had the same thing with Turbo and Tito. We had this snail who was friends with a human, and how do we shoot them together, It was really tough. But there were times where, like, I really looked at your snail and how she locomoted, and like there was that thing that you kind of want to go to with snails, right? And then there was also times where she just went. And like, I love those kind of choices. And the fact that you put the eyes, I mean, it was from the artwork, of course, but you put the eyes on the head instead of on the stalks. So that was like, woo, bravo, because that was so hard to manage on Turbo. To get the eyeballs on the stalks was a nightmare.
Funny enough, actually, sea snails, I do think, have the eyes on their head.
Oh, that's so good.
They
Yeah, there was some debate. About internally, and then I think you're 100% right, Max. There are certain sea snails that with the eyes on the side. So we're
Yeah.
like we're lucky. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so much more appealing. You know, you have a head that's actually a head. You have the eyes and the mouth triangle right there instead of up here and down here, you know, which is like there's certain things like that, like with a horse, right? You've got eyes up here and you've got a mouth down here. Like how do you see that
Oh yeah.
performance? It's really hard to put together as humans. Like we want to see the eyes and we want to see the mouth and we want to see how they relate to each other. And yeah.
100%. We had that on Kumba, the feature we made at Triggerfish a couple of years ago. It was all about zebras, and we had exactly that problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you end up everyone sort of talking at each other like this.
Yeah.
Never like this.
Exactly.
Like that.
Yeah. But actors do that all the time. They talk like this. I'm looking that way, but I'm talking to you over there because that's my good side.
Totally. Totally. Just catch the light.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. I think we hit most of my questions that I'd prepared. Do you guys have anything in particular that you wanted to talk about or bring up?
Just coming back to an earlier question, and I don't know how this will edit, but we actually found it kind of a weird advantage for Max to be offset in terms of time zones. So talking about working remotely, because we would obviously do 9 to 6 at Triggerfish and then hand in all this stuff to be reviewed. And by the time we were ready to start work next day, Max had gone through everything.
Oh, nice.
And we were ready to chat to him as soon as he woke up. And he woke up very early, like the whole time we were working on both Snail and Zog. He was always up at like 5 his time. So we would be on Skype calls like this, and we would see this sort of light getting lighter
Yeah.
in Max's background, and start to hear, you know, the people waking up in the house with him. It was actually great because we could sort of digest whatever Max's thoughts were. We could talk about it, come up with a plan internally, and then see if there's anything we wanted to run past him or anything, you know, that we should discuss. But we always had our thoughts pretty clear, so we could keep our meetings quite like efficient, you know. So we got into a really good rhythm. And I think that working remotely, if you've got multiple people in different continents, well, that gets a bit tricky. But for us, it worked really well.
Yeah. Yeah. I got to say, like when we were at DreamWorks and PDI, it was super easy because it was basically a 2-hour flight and it was in the same time zone. Here in Vancouver and Sydney, we have lots of time issues, right? Because they're a day and a half ahead or whatever it is.
Oh my God.
And yeah, it's a lot to wrangle. But if we had to do one more, if there was like one more location, it'd be really mind-boggling to manage all that stuff.
I can imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, but it'd be tough to just, I guess, especially nowadays, to hop on a plane and fly to Cape Town and, like spend a week with the team live. Because I know that, it's a lot of times it's those personal relationships. It's looking somebody in the eye and like being in the same room with them that just makes the communication down the road just, so much easier. But yeah, it's a challenge of our times, I guess.
Absolutely. I think the big, if I was, so I'm working as a board artist at the moment. I think that if I was trying to run a project, the thing that I would definitely be a bit anxious about is just what are the problems that people are discussing that I'm not aware of. At the studio, you could always get a sense. It's like there's something going on. So you kind of keep your ear to the ground. And if you feel that you should maybe say, hey, you guys have something, should we chat about this? People seem to be anxious about this. You can kind of read the room on Zoom and on email. And so people will only tell you if there's a problem, if they absolutely want to tell you. And sometimes depending on whoever it is, I think everyone always wants to be seen to be very competent and they can handle anything. And so for some personalities, it's more difficult to do that. So I would say that's the one thing that I would be very nervous about if we were trying to make this movie now, just not having a barometer,
Yeah.
But
I was talking to some of the animators that I'm working with right now, and we're remote and we talk about a lot of stuff. I try to touch base with everybody like once a month on a little round table, just one-on-ones, just, to kind of pick their brains about those types of things. And I think one of the things that comes up is like, if you're having especially technical difficulties, right? And you get a crash or something and you just go, ah, and no one hears you, like you're alone, and you don't get this, you don't get the support of your peers and the commiseration and, all that kind of stuff. And that sort of thing takes a toll,
Absolutely. And also if you're, what I find is if you're pitching, you can't hear if anything is landing, because you can't hear the laugh. Hopefully people have their cameras on and you can see them like smiling or whatever. But you always leave feeling a bit spooked. It's like, did that go over well? I don't know. This kind of
yeah.
One of the key things I found over the years with working remotely is communication, and like regular communication.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it meant I had to get up every day at 5, and even if there was nothing that we had to discuss, we always made a point in talking to each other, because it's such a difference, like to receive an email or to just have that always standing, that open line of communication and flow of information back and forth. And I feel like that does remove a bit of the threshold of, I can only call if there's something important,
Right.
Because we're already in a conversation. We're talking anyway. So let's see what comes up.
Yeah.
And I do think that is crucial. And we did not do that on other projects back in the day. And it's very easy for people to feel kind of a bit estranged from each other or from the project, and it becomes
Mm-hmm.
like it's us and them, and so having this constant flow of communication, even if there's nothing to talk about, it really, really helps to the bonding of the project, and making sure that you are still informed about everything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, just as an artist, I love hearing you guys talk about how excited you are for the team, to bring their best and to present their ideas, and you're open to it, because I do think that when you're on that, when the team is on that same creative page, and the artists have that open door, like to bring more and to contribute more, like you end up in that great, really creative space where everybody feels like, they're doing it together, and it's their thing. And it's really exciting. It's really great to hear you guys work that way.
Oh, and you had brought that up. You brought up happy accidents before.
Oh yeah.
And that is, again, one of the things that's like, it's so important in animation, because everything is so planned out and labored. Like all the story decisions, everything is so everything takes so long, and it's one of the challenges of our medium, I would say, is that there is so little spontaneity compared to live action.
Right.
But so leaving room for these happy accidents and encouraging people to try stuff and making mistakes and having a bit of time to we tried, it didn't work, but we learned this and that, but we got this scene that makes everything better now. And just having that little bit of luxury that we have now, I feel like, because these films are a bit more established. So we found a rhythm, there are a lot of teething problems that you have when you start a project with a new studio, and everyone has to get on the same page. And because the team already everyone know this is the kind of the quality we want to hit. There were things we had to learn, but we also had time to try out things without worrying about the schedule too much. And I think that's so important for animation, that you leave that room where you can play around and make mistakes and new discoveries.
Yeah. And it is funny because, we're creative people and we're artists, and we're also computer programmers and, geeks, and all these weird things that have to pull together to create this thing that we're doing. And I think too, like you mentioned, that, your films have a stop motion sensibility to them. in terms of, you know, things are underplayed a little bit. And I think that's also, it's just a really neat choice that makes it more human. Yeah, there, I guess if you, I think when I think about 2D, I don't know about you guys, but the thing that I love about 2D is it's so visceral. Like there's kind of like an emotional power to 2D because it's hand drawn. And I think you get a lot of that in stop motion because people have, you know, they've taken the puppet and they've posed the puppet, and like you see the fingerprints, right, in the Aardman stuff. And then
Absolutely.
and then in CG you don't have any of that. You have to work hard to put it back.
And
Yeah.
it's such a big thing for creativity and artists and expression is that human imperfection, right?
Yeah.
That actually, it's something I love about projects. I've like, the more I feel like you see, the more you appreciate if someone takes a leap and does something. It's not perfect, but it's raw and it's them.
Yeah.
And I think that's also what I'm responding when I watch 2D animation. You can really see the line of the artist. Like everyone draws the character slightly different, but that also gives it personality. Since we started on build sets, that was something we learned early on, that actually these little errors, when you look at them, like on the location, you look at them, it's like, this looks a bit weird, this tree looks a bit strange, and then you photograph it and it looks actually amazing because it's like all these human touches that give it personality, opposed to when you try to build the same tree in CG, you have to work so hard to get all of that back. And it's one of the big challenges we had when switching to CG. It's like really fighting for human touch and imperfections because they're so easily vanish like in CG, I think.
Yeah.
I think working on twos, just in terms of the animation, really, I think what it did is that it forced the team to make choices and not rely on the graphs and their curves, and to really spend time in the poses. And then we had the great luxury, of course, of Max's movies, Room on the Broom and Gruffalo, and then we also looked at the Gruffalo's Child for, you know, as references. But Room on the Broom specifically, there were things about that when we started doing the shows at Triggerfish, we were really inspired by just seeing some of those choices in spacing and, you know, hard stops, you know, like getting into a stop and then just keeping it there, which if you're working on ones, it's like really difficult to pull that off, right?
Yeah.
But in twos, there's just wonderful little things that you can do that it'll just sell it, you know, and then to kind of force people to animate by posing as opposed to and I work layered. Like when I used to work layered, and I was terrified of what would be revealed about my lack of knowledge. But as soon as we were forced to do that, I mean, the fact that there are half the amount of frames helps a lot. But yeah, it was. I think it's a real gauntlet that the teams go through. And funnily enough, we found that a lot of the time the graduates, that we always have quite a lot of graduates from the animation school in these movies, they would pick it up pretty quickly. And the guys who would really struggle are people like myself, who are used to working layered and have a specific workflow. To say all of a sudden, okay, your whole bag of tricks, throw it out. It's key poses and then breakdowns and then break down those breakdowns. So
yeah.
So it's intimidating, but it's so much fun when you get into the rhythm of it.
Oh yeah, and the results are just absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that in terms of happy accidents, I think you did have a question as well, Dave, about do we use the voice actors for reference? I mean, do we shoot them? Do we get to shoot them? So we do get to shoot them, and there are some actors specifically who just offer up real gems. We worked with Sally Hawkins on Snail the Whale, and I mean, her vocal performance is just absolutely outstanding. I don't think we gave her a lot of direction. Any direction. I don't know. Did we give her any direction? I mean, I think she just came in, and it was like turning on a tap, and she just let forth with just so many great options and so much emotion. I mean, it was we were completely stunned, and then sort of getting to have a look at what she does, and just little hints, you know, in the eyes, eye dots, and that kind of stuff. Funny enough, we also really encourage our animators to film reference, and we do. At Triggerfish, they do have a culture of shooting reference and pitching reference, or pitching reference with thumbnails, or and that's actually where you do find a lot of the happy accidents, is when a take goes a bit funny, but there's something about it that's exciting, and then you're like, oh, we should definitely get that in, like, put that in, like don't make it perfect, like if there's a stumble or like a funny something that someone does with their hand, or something that just shows a bit of thought process, or that's always really exciting, right?
Yeah, that was also a challenge, right, on Snail and the Whale, because we couldn't really do it to the extent that we used to.
That's true.
I'm sure, Rob Brydon had a whole bunch of amazing performance choices, and you really made that eyeball.
Well, there's a one of the first bits of lip sync we had to do. I remember was when Whale said, "Come sail with me," and I was sitting with the animator, and we were looking at it. We're just in the grass going, "Make it less," and it went from like "Come sail with me," to like "Come sail with me." And it's only when there was barely any motion we're like, okay, that works, because otherwise it's this giant thing flapping, and just kind of kills the whole illusion, right?
Yeah. I guess one of the things too that I think can be really useful about shooting, video reference and trying stuff out with your body is, like, apart from stepping away from the machine, which is always a good thing, you just do stuff subconsciously that you can't plan, and then when you see it later, that's when you just go, oh yeah, that feels really unique and special. I guess as an animator, you don't want to rely on your bag of tricks, right? You want to try to find things that are unique to the character and the moment, and you don't want to just do these same like rote gestures because, oh yeah, this always works. Whenever my character's perplexed, I'm just going to go up and scratch the back of my neck because I know what that means. And it's just, it's really neat, that process. It's really exciting.
Yeah, it's sort of like the Pokemon, like kind of like ha ha ha.
I guess totally. I trace it back to Glenn Keane did it on Beauty and the Beast, and Baloo the Bear did it in Jungle Book.
Yeah.
But,
Baloo scratch. Yeah.
Anyway, so I think we're kind of about out of time. Any last comments before we sign off, you guys?
Well, just thank you so much for taking the time and talking to us. And it's really nice and rewarding to see that you clearly watch the films and you care about them.
Oh, I do. And if I've learned anything from this conversation is now I'm going to, whenever I have to do this stuff again, I'm just going to send the questions in advance, and I'm just going to sit back and just go.
It was such a pleasure chatting to you, Dave. It's a real treat, and
it's really awesome.
And a huge thanks to Spark as well for showing Snail the Whale. It's really awesome. Yeah, thanks for the support.
Yeah, Spark is great. That's really a part of the awesomeness of the Vancouver animation community is, this festival and the people involved in Spark. It's always been great to be a part of it, but to be here in the city and experience it a lot more regularly is really, really great.
Awesome.
So anyway,
hope to make it one day when things return back to normal.
Yeah, we'll definitely get you over here. It's really, really fun.
Oh, cool. Yeah. And let us know if you're ever in Cape Town. Also in the future when all of that's possible. Yeah.
Okay, I will. Thank you. Really, really great to meet you guys.
Great to meet you too, Dave.
Great to meet you too.
Cheers. Cheers, Max.
Bye. Thank you.
Cheers.